are going to be talking about ophthalmology and the booming clinical research industry. I want to welcome you all today to this webinar. My name is David Silverman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Clinical Research Fastrack, and I'm honored to be here with Jamaica Cundiff, our Associate Director. Jamaica, say hello.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here.
And Jamaica was a student in our program. And we also have with us today, Riley Mitchell, who took our course, was it in January of this year, Riley?
Sure was, and it was great.
Hello. Great, and also Richie Kahn. And Richie is our star guest today. He's an instructor on our program. And just to give a little context, Riley, when you enrolled in our program, you were living in Chicago and just finishing up school. I believe you were a pre-med student, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And your sister was going to be enrolling in this program in Raleigh, North Carolina. And did she tell you about it, or did you tell her about it? How did these two sisters end up in Raleigh at this program?
Oh, it's a great story. I'll keep it short. Basically, she was looking to make a career change. I had just graduated and I didn't know what to do with my life. And she was like, I found this awesome program. It looks so great. I'm going to Raleigh. We could hang out. We could learn some new skills. And that's how we ended up in Raleigh.
So both of you were in Raleigh, and
yes.
Part of our course is career coaching. And I remember your sister, Mackenzie, she asked this question in the career coaching. She said, is it okay if I'm in an interview and I tell a joke? And I never had that question before. And I said, well, it depends on the joke, but yes, you can have a sense of humor. And then both of you were hired immediately out of our program. And part of the benefit of our program is we're introducing our students to all kinds of experts in the field. So you probably met about 14, 16 research professionals in that session you were in. And now when we provide our programs on Zoom, you can meet even more. And we have our instructors coming in from all over the country. But one of your instructors was Richie Kahn. And Richie, at the time, you were at Aura Research, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. A full service ophthalmology development company.
In ophthalmology. Today, we're talking about ophthalmology, but just to round out this whole story, you liked Riley and her sister Mackenzie, and so you introduced them to people at Aura. Is that how they started working at Aura?
Yeah, so I think I probably made the joke to Riley and Mackenzie's class, and I just made the same joke over Zoom last weekend when I was teaching with CRF again. But for the live sessions, I take mental notes on students who are really engaged and thoughtful and asking good questions. And I sure did for Riley and Mackenzie. And I think it was a couple weeks later, I got a call from Lauren Belina Chang, and we were talking a little bit about if I knew any opportunities, I think in Charlottesville and maybe somewhere in North Carolina as well. And the light bulb kind of went off and I said, yeah, I do actually. And I think there might be some opportunities where I'm working. We were talking about internships. And when I reached out to some people internally, they said, well, we don't want interns, but we want entry-level grads to hire. And I said, well, gee, I know two who I think would be a great fit.
And then you both had to interview, you and your sister both interviewed. Of course, they were impressed with your backgrounds. You both had these pre-med backgrounds and really good medical knowledge. And guess what? You both had this fast track training. And I was blown away that both of them got hired in you were living in different parts of the country though, Riley, right? You were in, where were you living? And then where was your sister?
I had just moved to Rhode Island. That's where I grew up, and my sister was living in Florida, but the position was travel-based, so we had to go where we needed to go anyway, so worked out.
Great, and it was ophthalmology research, and that's what we're here to talk about. But first, Richie, I want everyone who's watching to get to know you a little better and learn about how you got into clinical research and how you got to where you are today. So
Sure.
Can you just take us back? How did you get into clinical research?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll take it back a step or two before that. So I'm actually a public health policy person by training. clinical researcher by trade for going on 11 years now, and a patient advisor as well. So it's funny how things work out. A couple months after coming to Aura, I learned that I had seemed to be pretty clear-cut symptoms of glaucoma. Turns out it actually wasn't glaucoma. It's a rare disease that impacts the eyes. It felt generally very lucky that I had that public health advocacy experience. I could put on that patient advocacy hat, and fortunate professionally, because there's no place better to learn about the eyes than when you're working in the eyes full time. So I mentioned I'd been in clinical research for 11 years. It was really common when I started for people to say, well, yeah, David, I kind of fell into it. I remember clear as day, I was working in patient advocacy and in public health. I was finishing my master's degree. I was about 6 months from having student loans due. I knew I was going to ask my now wife of 10 years to marry me. She was also in public health. And I kind of felt like two public health salaries weren't going to pay the bills or the student loans. So I went on Craigslist one night. I got a pizza, I got some beer, and I was sitting there eating a slice of extra cheese or whatever. And I saw this thing. It was a contract feasibility specialist in clinical research. So I immediately started Googling clinical research, feasibility, and I kind of went, you know what, this seems like a really good way to put my public health skills to good use, developing new therapeutics and devices for patients that need them most. And what can I tell you? That was 11 years later. I've now worked in a number of aspects in the industry, but all the while keeping that focus on the patient front of mind.
So you kind of lucked out. You saw this job, you had a good public health background. And back in the day, you said that was 11 years ago?
Yeah, just about.
So 11 years ago, it was a little bit different. People would just apply to jobs and they could get hired because no one had any training. And the trials weren't quite so complex as they are now. And fast forward now, we have a lot of treatments and therapies that we've developed, but now it's getting more advanced. We're looking at genetic therapies. We're looking at really, really unique molecules and more complex combinations and protocols that are harder to follow. So the industry is looking for people with a little more training. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I've heard several times after referring former CRF students, for various positions, is they were just really impressed. One of the problems we have in this industry typically is you have entry-level jobs where they say they want 6 months or 2 years experience, but they're entry level, right? So it's a chicken or the egg. How do you train more well-qualified, skilled clinical research professionals? How do you get them the experience they need to get these entry-level jobs? And what do you do when we have a shortage of clinical researchers, right? So the thing that I'd heard multiple times from various hiring managers and folks who've interviewed clinical research fast track grads was, without that 2 years of experience, the combination of the classroom and the internship hands-on experience they gained, much to the interviewer's surprise, made them better qualified and more thoroughly trained and experienced than a lot of the individuals who had 2 years experience but no formal training.
Yeah, so our program does qualify everyone to get in the field. So Riley, you took our program, you had this introduction to Aura research, but you did have to interview. And they asked you questions. Was it a pretty tough interview? What kind of questions are they asking you in those interviews?
Oh goodness. Reaching back, I think the most complicated part of the interview, honestly, was just the length. I interviewed with 3 different people in one day. So, it was one right after the other. They all had a variety of questions from me, ranging from, the character questions like, what kind of cookie would you be, to, some things like, what is your familiarity with the federal regulations in their application to clinical research? So it's a really broad spectrum. It depends on their background and what they're interested in. A lot of soft skills, talking about transferable skills from your previous jobs, was so important. And then just, being able to tell a story of how you're competent enough to do the job, which Clinical Research Fast Track informs you on how to say, like, I haven't done exactly that, but Clinical Research Fast Track showed me that this is what it is, and this is experience in the past that I have that's similar. And that was really key in those interviews.
And you really made those connections. You started out in ophthalmology research, right? That's what you were doing. Okay, so I want to learn a little bit more about what's happening in ophthalmology. And Richie, you were in that field for many years. But before we even start, can you first explain to us what is clinical research? I want to make sure everyone has the baseline that knows what we're talking about, and then let's talk about ophthalmology research. So how would you describe what is clinical research, Richie?
Absolutely. So clinical research is the rigorous, regimented process of qualifying and bringing new drugs and devices to market. So anything your doctor can prescribe. I'm sitting here with a couple different ophthalmology products behind my my monitor, behind my virtual backdrop here. Various virtual reality headsets that can help analyze the visual field and test for glaucoma. Essentially, all of these things have to go through multiple phases of research. When you're developing a drug in particular, typically takes between 10 and 12 years, might take up to $2.25 billion with the B dollars. That involves time in the lab, preclinical research, first in human trials, all the way up through phase 4 post-marketing. So it's a really labor-intensive, rigorous, and very much needed process to make sure everything that comes to market is safe and effective.
Wait, I got to stop you there. You said a couple of things. First, you talked about virtual reality. Virtual reality is not what I think of when I think of clinical research, but think of the technologies that we're now testing to move forward in clinical research. And then you talked about first in humans in phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. I can't see that well.
I'm going to show you guys a virtual reality headset, but all right.
Because of your virtual. So you've got this headset that's been through clinical trials. There's different types of drugs. So Riley, when you were working at Aura, what type of trials? I know there's a lot of confidentiality too, so you can't reveal anything proprietary, but were these medications like oral medications or eye drops? What kinds of things were you testing over there?
So I was in the anterior segment at Aura, which means that I worked basically in primarily dry eye studies, which mostly means eye drops. However, there was one study I worked on that was a nasal spray, and one study that I worked on that was an injection. And the nasal spray I actually think is coming to market sometime soon, which is pretty cool.
Nice. Wow. Wait, so you were working on something that's going to be an approved treatment?
Yes, I sure did.
That's really exciting. Many people work in the industry and never work on something that's approved, because part of what we're doing in clinical research is determining safety and efficacy. We hear that a lot when they talk about these COVID-19 trials. It has to be safe and it has to be effective. And guess what, folks? We want to make sure if it's not safe, it doesn't come to market. And so it's important for a lot of these trials not to work, because we don't want to expose the public to harm. That's the number one rule of clinical research. So if you were working on that, Riley, that means it was found to be safe, but also efficacious for that particular condition that you were treating. That's exciting. Richie, you were at Aura for a while. Did you work on many approved therapies or treatments?
So I worked on a couple. You know, backing up to what you were saying, David, about how cool it was that Riley was working on something that's getting approved. I think it's one of 5,000 compounds that go into testing in humans winds up getting approved. And it's not for lack of trying and lack of effort. You know, like you said, we only want to approve products that are safe, that are efficacious, they actually work, and where they're needed, right? So I remember, I think it was maybe my second or third day at Aura. I was up in the office. I'm usually home-based. And I was meeting with the gentleman who runs that department. And he started giving me an overview of dry eye. And I admitted it to him at the time. I apologized. Afterwards, I said, this just seems boring. You know, who's really interested in dry eye? And my ears perked up when he said, well, think about it. You know, everyone's looking at screens all the time. Now it's worse. We're all on Zoom and we're staring at phones. When you're looking at screens in Jamaica, you're probably doing this right now. I can feel that I am. It changes the rate at which you blink. So when we're not blinking every 5 to 7 seconds.
Now we all have to blink. Can we all take a minute to blink? Everyone looking at the screen.
The eyes start to dry out, right? So when he said that, I kind of went, what? And I thought about it. And what was really surprising was for all of the products on market, whether it's Visine or this True Tear nerve stimulator, which is something they actually put up the nose and it makes you cry. It works. These products help a small subset of the patient population. So even though there's a lot of stuff out there, it doesn't work for most people, and it's not necessarily working as well as patients would like. And, there's so many eye drops. The idea, whether it's for dry eye or glaucoma or something else, is if you can really target the therapy, you can improve the likelihood that it's delivered directly to the portion of the eye, whether anterior, which is front of the eye, or posterior, back of the eye where it's needed. But I can tell you, someone who's on eye drops twice a day, number one, patients aren't typically instructed how to use eye drops correctly. Never occurred to me, never thought about it until I was 33 years old, thought I knew how to use eye drops. But when you put in an eye drop, there's no way of knowing if you're getting 1 dose or 5, number one. Number two, patients aren't really instructed for the proper ways and techniques to use eye drops. And number three, they're not much fun. You have irritation, you have redness, they sting, So if there's a promise of developing an eye drop that doesn't have to be taken multiple times a day, or if there is a new implantable or injectable device, goes in once, it's relatively painless, you don't need eye drops, you don't have to worry about medication adherence, that's fantastic. It's all about the patient, and those are more patient-centric approaches.
And so what you're saying is there's a lot of opportunity for improvement, and therefore there's a lot of these potential trials that we could be going through to bring out something better. Maybe something you have to take less frequency, that you have a better idea of the dosing, or and they're more effective. So let's dive into this a little deeper. You're testing out these different types of treatments. And Riley, you were working, and you said you were a traveling CRC. So what does that mean, a traveling CRC? You were living in the East Coast in your home, and then where did you travel to?
Well, David, at the time I was at Aura, I believe there were 26 different sites across the US, anywhere from Memphis, Tennessee, all the way over to, there were multiple in California, some in Arizona, some in North Dakota. And basically what it meant was there would be an eye doctor's office, and the PI would be stationed at that office. The research would be conducted there.
PI is principal investigator. That's the person in charge of the trial at that location.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah,
so
go ahead.
I'll work on the terminology.
And so there's a lot of that in this field. The PI is just the tippy tip of the iceberg.
Sure is. So basically, when you're in a clinical trial, there's usually multiple visits that you have to go to. So your visit one is usually screening and or enrollment into the study, where they see, what's your medical history? Do you qualify for this study? And so on the day one, the visit two might be a week later, it might be a month later, whatever it is. From my position, our team, no matter where we came from, would send 4 to 10 people, depending on how many participants we were expecting, to a single location. And us as traveling coordinators would function at the site that we had traveled to with the PI to run those days of studies. And then we would disperse back home in between those visits. So it was a really unique model. And it was cool because I got to see a lot of the US. And, you get to meet so many different participants and make friends everywhere you go.
Wow. And Jamaica, you worked as a clinical research coordinator before you came to Clinical Research Fastrack, and you used to say you loved working with all the participants in your trial. Is that right? I mean, was that one of the joys of being in the field?
Yes, absolutely. Especially being a coordinator. I mean, if you just love working with patients, you get to create this experience for them. And clinical research at face value can seem scary. So I think just knowing that you could be the face of that, and you make it this wonderful experience they have, and they want to come back and see you, and that's retention, and you're like, yes, and your site is winning, and it's just great. So
Great. Okay, so Riley, you're traveling around to all these places that are research sites, and you're enrolling the participants in the trial, and you're conducting the trial during those visits. Now, Richie, you're doing something totally different. When you were at Aura, what was your role there, and how did it differ from what Riley was doing?
Yeah, so I was a bit of a jack of all trades. I was building preferred relationships with the pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies that were developing these new products, these new drugs and devices. So one of the reasons Riley's job was so cool, taking a step back, when you go through my clinical research basics course at Clinical Research Fastrack, we talk about how data integrity and consistency across research sites and across coordinators and patients within research sites is really important. But when you get to these larger later phase studies, phase 2, phase 3 programs, you expand to way more patients and way more sites. And it is a lot easier to lose that consistency. So in Riley's role, which I think was a key differentiator for the company, for Aura, it was all about consistency, maintaining the same level of data integrity to make sure that something that was done at Dr. Kundev's site was the same as Dr. Mitchell's site. So you could really accurately assess whether or not this new investigational product was worth approving, whether or not it was safe and efficacious. So I got really familiar with how that work was done, not only in dry eye, but in glaucoma and in allergy as well. My job was really kind of business development and sales, but I made it a point to really understand how the sausage is made, so to speak. So I would partner with project management, clinical operations, the medics, the people who are really getting the clinical research done. So my thing was always, my job is to connect you with the people you need to make your program a success. And it was all about customer service, for the good of the patient.
Wow, you're bringing up a lot. I want to pull up this slide because Riley was coordinating the trial at different sites. You are working in business development and connecting with project managers, making sure it's good. There's a lot of different things we can do in clinical research. And look at that picture right there. Does that look familiar? That's Jamaica. That's you. And there's the role of the clinical research coordinator, the clinical research associate, there's regulatory specialists, data managers, research technicians, research nurses, biostatisticians. And if you look at these roles, it doesn't even have your role in there, Richie, what you were doing. Now, you were doing business development and helping with that project management relationship, but have you done these other roles in the past before?
Yeah, so I've had a number of roles over the years. I started out and double checking here. It's actually not on here, but feasibility and site ID, I spent a lot of time there. So feasibility is determining whether or not a clinical research protocol as written, is it possible? Will doctors be interested? Will patients be interested? Is there something in the inclusion and exclusion criteria that would be a barrier to patient enrollment and study completion? If the
This is fascinating. This is absolutely fascinating to me because we threw up all those roles on the slides and you're talking about the role you're in, the role you were doing, and they're not even mentioned.
There's
and
so
I
much
think
out
that's
there.
what's so important for everyone who's listening. They say, oh, what do you train us to do? And what we help our students and our graduates do is learn the core competencies of clinical research, the foundation for that springboard to get into the field into all of these roles. Now, once you have that foundation, there's a lot of opportunity. Some people come to our course with accounting backgrounds, and wow, they can do a lot and study startup and budgets and contracts and in auditing and monitoring because they have an accounting background. Some people are nurses and they can be on the more clinical side, patient facing. And then Riley, you were a pre-med student, is that right? That was your background before you came? And had you done any jobs in either in college or out of college before Fastrack?
Yes, I had a lot of jobs. So primarily throughout college, I worked as an undergraduate research assistant, which helped familiarize me with research in general. I also worked at K Jewelers, which familiarized me with developing the rapport with guests, which we now call participants in clinical research. And I also worked as a medical scribe, which was ever so helpful with the medical terminology. So I wasn't learning that in addition to, all of the clinical research terminology. So I think those would be like my three biggest things that I did that really helped me get in the field.
All right, and in Jamaica, you had a completely different background. Can you share your background, how you got into clinical research?
Yes, I have a bachelor's in psychology, and much of my career prior to research was all in behavioral health. I was a behavioral health professional. I've done hospice, social work. So I've been in the medical field, so to speak, but more on the patient advocacy side. Still learned a lot of those transferable skills, right? GDP, and having to build relationships and trust, and even kind of the voluntariness element of it too, right? Because that's along the sides of hospice. But yep, so that's kind of my background prior to going to Fastrack.
So we have all these different backgrounds. You are a public health person, Richie, and they're all, and really you can come from all these different backgrounds, and with the proper training and learning those core competencies like Clinical Research Fastrack, then you can jump into this career and really go in a lot of different directions, which is so exciting. I want to now mention that any of you who have questions, you can put them into the Q&A or into the chat, and Jamaica will be reading them, and hopefully we can get to most of your questions in the next 10 to 15 minutes or so. But I also wanted to bring up this topic. We've been talking about ophthalmology, and also there's a lot of rare diseases that we're tackling in clinical research. Now, when we talk about rare diseases, Richie, in ophthalmology or in other therapeutic areas, that means can you explain what a rare disease is? Because there's a lot of people that have rare diseases. How is that possible?
Yeah, there are millions of us. There's an entire gradient. There's rare, there's ultra rare. There we go. Exactly. So it's all a question of exactly how rare are you? For my particular disease, which isn't that exciting, I'm patient 17 with this particular variation. I think they've determined it's like 1 in 700,000 or 1 in 750,000. But I was talking to someone last week who's a caregiver. I believe her 2 children are 2 of 2 globally in their rare disease. So it's absolutely fascinating.
So that we also have rare diseases. I think if it's under 100,000 people that have it, is that the definition of a rare disease?
It could be. I'd have to double check it.
And I heard this. I heard 10% of our population have a rare disease. So even though it's a rare disease, there's a lot of different rare diseases. And once you add them all up, there's a lot. This affects a lot of us.
Yeah.
So it's a really exciting area of clinical research where there's so much attention and so much opportunity, and our field is growing. Even during COVID-19, we still had all of these trials that were happening. And then what happened with COVID-19 is we then had all these new vaccine trials, diagnostics for COVID-19, therapeutics for COVID-19, plus the innovation of our industry hasn't stopped. So while COVID-19 has added to the amount of jobs in the field and the opportunities, we still have all the rare diseases. We still have all the cancer trials. We still have all diabetes, heart disease, and all these other therapeutic areas where we're doing trials. So I want to now ask this question, which is so important. And I'm going to start with you, Jamaica. And that is, why is this field so important to you? Why clinical research?
It is extremely important to me because of how fulfilling it is on so many different levels. It's fulfilling on the level of wanting to constantly be learning. I love being challenged. I get bored easily. I think just the constant change and knowledge you gain. And you'll hear it during our class. Instructors who've been in the industry for 20 years, they're still learning something new every single day, which I find is fascinating. And it's also fulfilling on the element of being in the medical field, wanting to help others and helping millions, hopefully, right? And just being able to touch people on a larger scale is also what is extremely fulfilling. And of course, I mean, naturally, there's financial gain, there's professional gain, there's a title, there's all the great perks that come with it. But because it's so well-rounded and because every single role in the industry is a valuable role. It's just one peephole. It's one perspective of being in the industry. That's what I also find is exciting, because that means you can constantly stay in this industry and bounce around from different positions, and really all of it is of value, never a waste of time, constantly learning. So that's what I love. It's just
constantly learning, constantly growing, so many opportunities. Riley, why is clinical research important to you?
Well, I'll start off by saying probably for a lot of the reasons that Jamaica just said, but in addition, it's really interesting to me and important for me to learn what the process is of how these drugs get on the market. I'm a huge advocate of health. I love working out. I love eating healthy and putting safe things into my body. So knowing that I'm a part of putting these drugs on the market in some way, and knowing that I contributed, and knowing that good people, intelligent people like myself, seeing the process sometimes all the way through, are the people that are working on this, has just set me a little easier on some drugs, so that I feel more comfortable when I need them. Like, I know how that got here, and I know that it's likely to work and it's going to be safe for me to take. So Jamaica plus that reason, I think, is huge for me in clinical research.
Okay, and Richie, I gotta throw it to you. I know they've covered so many areas. What about you? Why is this such an important field to you?
Yeah, a couple things that I wanted to touch on. So Jamaica, you hit on two things that really kind of resonate with me. I mentioned my background's in public health. So before I got into public health, I used to volunteer in the back of an ambulance. I come from a family of nurses. I knew I was interested in medicine, but I wanted to make an impact that was larger than one patient at a time. So that's what got me into public health. And when I learned about clinical research, I kind of went, okay, this is another avenue to do that. You know, just like Riley and Jamaica were describing. The sense of purpose and feeling like you're making a difference is huge. And Jamaica, the other thing you mentioned, you know, just the pace of change in this industry. I hadn't worked in ophthalmology for, I think, probably 5 years before I came to Aura, and everything had just completely changed. So it was learning the whole time. Now I'm working across indications, you know, so I spend a lot of time in oncology, which is about 40% of the work in this industry. And cancer just changes so quickly. Even if you're an expert and you were up to date last year, if you've been out of it for 6-12 months, it's like starting from scratch, which is to say, I get bored easily. I was looking for something that changes frequently and there's more to learn all the time. And an industry where you can't rest on your laurels, you have to constantly be improving.
well, that's good.
For the good of the patient.
I love that you said that.
We are really, really on the cutting edge of medicine, and we bring hope to people, patients, families, but also we're bringing hope to our students who are going through our course, because we're able to move into a field that's growing where there's opportunity. And that is such a beautiful thing too. We have a lot of questions I know that people have been asking. In Jamaica, I saw one of them I wanted Riley to start answering, and then you can kick in. What is a typical day of a CRC in clinical research? Or maybe that's not a fair question. Maybe there's no typical day, but what do you do?
Yeah, and that would be my exact first response is there is no typical day. There's so many responsibilities and I would say opportunities of a clinical research coordinator to learn. You're recruiting patients to come in and, you know, screen them or pre-screen them. You are doing their medical histories, making sure that they're safe to participate in the trial. What drugs are they taking that might interact with the drug we're looking at? You are potentially helping out the PI with some of the study procedures that need to be performed during the day. Sometimes you're doing simple things like taking vitals and asking them like what certain symptoms they're experiencing. Have they developed any AEs or adverse events that may be possibly related to the drug? Not for us to determine, that's higher up the chain. You're making calls to the sponsor to let them know of certain things that are going on in the trial, or to ask them how they would like to proceed because there's not something specified in the protocol. And the protocol is basically the recipe for the study. How are we going to run this? What needs to be done and what data needs to be collected? Sometimes they don't cover everything the first time. Sometimes it's consenting patients, making sure that they are fully aware of everything that they are voluntarily about to participate in, and making sure that they know they can retract that consent at any point in time. It's so important, that piece of clinical research. So there's just a whole lot that goes into it. It's emails, it's phone calls, it's face-to-face time, and sometimes it's administrative work. But like everyone said, there's something new to be done and learned every day.
Wow, there's so much going on. And just when you bring all that up, there's a lot to know and a lot to learn to get into the field. And the field's looking for people who are trained and qualified. Jamaica, what other questions do people in our audience have for us?
There's tons of great questions. So just to kind of keep the flow going, I'd like to just dive deeper. What's the difference between a CRC and a CRA? And is there professional advancement in the field? So I think
there's a lot. Richie, you got to take this one. Is there professional advancement? I'm going to ask you, Richie, who's been advancing probably every year for the last 11 years. I know you recently left Aura for an even more advanced position. But let's start at the beginning. CRC and CRA, what's the difference?
Yeah, so the clinical research coordinator, you're the one who makes it happen at the site. So you, as far as, a day in the life, I used to take research teams to learn exactly about that topic, right? So you might start your day reviewing paperwork for patients who are coming in. Then you have patient visits, then you have the post-patient paperwork, then you're recruiting patients, calling patients, pre-screening them. You're probably working with the CRA. These are the traveling monitors that come in to make sure the principal investigator is doing her job, to make sure that everything's being done according to protocol. The clinical research associates, these are the folks who, until COVID at least, were traveling 4 or 5 days a week, sometimes all over the country, sometimes multiple countries. There's a lot of career growth in both roles. A lot of coordinators decide they want to be monitors, or they want to get into project management. They might want to get into something else. A lot of the traveling monitors get into managing teams of monitors. They might get into clinical operations, which is to say how the trials actually work, how they're run. I started out as a feasibility specialist or a feasibility associate. I am now an executive director, so I've moved around a bit, always for career growth. And it's definitely an industry where there's plenty of growth opportunity. There is a need for people who can stick it out and learn, can get experience across organizations and across the industry. So I've worked at contract research organizations. These are the companies that get the work from, say, a Pfizer or a Biogen to actually develop these products. I've worked on the clinical research site side for a network of research sites that are doing a lot of the COVID vaccine trials right now. When I was over there, they were doing Ebola work, which was really cool. Most recently, I've moved back to one of the things I'm most passionate about, which is the intersection of research and technology. Because with COVID, there really seems to be this move forward to make these trials accessible to patients where they are and how they want to participate. And thanks to research, I think that's how we're going to get there, particularly as it's powered by technology. So I've been able to use all of those different skill sets, all the different training, all the different experiences to move about the industry and to ultimately fill out my skill set and make me a more qualified candidate.
So tons of room for advancement. Really, yeah. I mean, that's what's so exciting about this field. We have this student of ours, Jules. She started out as a research assistant. She's about 23 years old, and she went to a site network, and she's a research assistant. And then because there's a lot of mobility, someone at her site got promoted and left, and so she became a coordinator. After 3 months, assistant coordinator, she's coordinating the trials, and then her manager left for a better position somewhere else. After 6 months on the job, she was managing her site and had gotten promoted twice in 6 months. And there's so much room for advancement because it's a growing field. And I have this slide. We just looked on LinkedIn. There's 40,983 open positions in clinical research. They're hard to get, though, unless you have the proper training, qualifications, and experience. This isn't just for anybody. You really have to have the proper training to get there. Jamaica, do you have more questions for us? We only have about 5 more minutes left.
Yes. So there's a couple questions that I'm gonna just combine into one giant chat for us. So just to talk about our program, basically, how do you get into this program? How do you get accepted? What's the training look like? How is the ability to get a job afterwards? What type of jobs can we land? You know, kind of a bigger question. But
Okay, so we have a training program that you can complete in 3 weeks. It's very intensive. There are other programs out there, and you can Google them. I'm in San Francisco, and there's a program out here at UC Berkeley that will take you a year or two to complete, and then they don't have the same kind of support to help people get in the industry. Our program is very intensive. So instead of doing, the hours over the course of a year, we condense it into 148 hours in 3 weeks. And once you're done with that, we are helping you with your resumes, your cover letters. We're introducing you to people like Richie Kahn and Riley Mitchell, who are in the field. And we can provide a lot of connections. So just like Riley stepped out of our program, was hired just a few weeks later, Jamaica, you went through the same thing. You took our program and you were hired just weeks after taking our program. We now have site managers and research networks contacting us on a daily basis, and they're hiring and they're looking for our graduates. So to get into the program, you do have to apply, and you have to go through the application process and be accepted. And it doesn't matter if you have a medical background or if you have an English background, banking. What matters is that you have a passion for science, that you are good with people, and you're good with data and information. This is a field where we're using a lot of data and information, and you have to be, what do we say, Richie? Meticulous, is that the word? You've got to be detail-oriented and meticulous and good with people, good with data. And that can be from any field. You don't have to be from a science field originally, as long as you have that passion for healthcare and science. Thanks, Jamaica. That was a great question. I didn't want to talk too long. I'm going to put on our screen a little bit later our phone number, and people can contact us for more information for sure. We have time for one or two more questions.
Awesome. Yep. So we have a couple people who are just asking about their background. I have a background in ophthalmology. I have a background in data management and drug safety. What type of positions would be available to me?
So many positions. We have everything from the coordinator position. There's data managers. There's regulatory specialists. For people who more have a marketing or sales background, they can work on the business development. Richie, you've gone from all those different sides. So there are many, many opportunities for you once you have the proper training. Jamaica, what else? We got 2 more minutes left.
Yes, of course. So what about if I only have a bachelor's degree and that's just about it?
Well, Riley, you have a bachelor's degree, isn't that right?
I sure do.
Yeah, that is all you need to get into the field: a bachelor's degree, a passion for science, and the training, the qualifications, the experience, and the support that we provide so that you can get into the field. What else, Jamaica? We have 2 minutes left for everybody.
Well, I don't know if we can answer this all in about 2 minutes, but maybe we can go to Richie for this. What do you think the future of clinical research is? What does that look like? What's the future of research?
That's a great question to end on. What is the future of clinical research, Richie?
It's going to be a wild ride. It's always fun when you're talking to folks in clinical research and they say, like, what do you think you're going to be doing in 3 years? I bet it hasn't been created yet. It's not even on the radar. I think research is going to continue putting the patient first. We're going to do that by bringing studies to patients where they are, how they want to participate. Like Riley, I see you're wearing a wearable, an iPhone or something. There are trials now, 10,000 patients powered by Apple Watches, not iPhones. I'm thinking about the iPhone because there are a ton of trials using iPhones, so there's going to be more technology. There's going to be the focus on these harder to recruit patient populations, harder to recruit studies, where it's really going to be critically important to figure out who are these patients, where are these patients, how do we get their attention, their interest in clinical research as a care option. There's going to be a need for more and more researchers, both doctors and research professionals like Riley and like Jamaica and like David. It's going to be exciting. I'll put it that way.
The future is bright. If you do want to learn more, Richie, you promised to be on our podcast coming up, so you can hear Richie again. He's going to be on a future podcast. We now have our own with guest speakers. Jamaica's been on there. Riley, we'd love to have you back on for a future podcast. You can catch us on Spotify or visit our website for that. If you do have more questions, this is our phone number at 602-883-7944. You can email us, go to our website. We're back in the office tomorrow. Don't call us now. No one's going to answer. It's a little bit late, but give us a call. This is a fabulous industry. There is so much opportunity in clinical research. And to answer that question about what the future holds, the future of clinical research is bright. So I want to thank you, Jamaica Kunda, for joining us, our Associate Program Director. Riley Mitchell, thank you so much for coming all the way from the East Coast to stay up late with us tonight. And our special guest, Richie Kahn, coming from the Raleigh-Durham area in North Carolina. Thank you all. Have a great night and be safe out there.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity.
Everyone. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.